Hello everyone, back to today's second video. Going to have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days for today's second video. This will take us to around the 22nd of January. We'll be able to extend out beyond that with the extended GFS and also ECMWF. I'm going to bring update with Beijing Climate Centre as well for the next 40 days. So we haven't looked at that for a little while. So I'll bring update what the Beijing Climate Centre is now showing for the next 40 days, taking us well into February. So today's first video update, of course, on a Saturday. We always have a weekend broadcast, and that video was released earlier on this afternoon. So it's going to be a bit of a transitional week ahead, really. The first part of the week ahead is going to be quite mild, cloudy and damp, and then the second half is going to turn quite a lot colder. And the detail for the end of the week is fairly uncertain. So have a look at weekend broadcast and see what's going on. I did say in that, but I'll bring it to date with the Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation, but actually I thought I'd leave that off for today's video. Got a little bit more on the stratosphere for today's video, and we'll include the Arctic, North Atlantic Oscillations in tomorrow's Gasworthy Sunday roundup. So we're going to start off though by saying a big thank you to our latest PayPal donors. They've had a new donation through PayPal for Gasworthy. I'm going to say a big thank you to Mish Lucas. A big thank you to Mish Lucas for becoming our latest PayPal donor. So if you would like to become a donor for Gasworthy and give a donation to help from the website, then all you need to do is come to gasworthy.me PayPal page. I'm on that page right now. Go to this page, sign into a PayPal account, and then you can donate whatever amount of money you would like as a one-off donation. But a huge success since we started this in June last year. Big thank you to all of the PayPal donors for their very kind generosity and for doing that. And a special thank you to Mish Lucas for today's donation. Also got to say a big thank you to our patrons. So if you would like to become a patron for Gasworthy, so we have 53 patrons, of course, at the moment. If you'd like to become a patron for Gasworthy, then all you need to do is come to the Gasworthy's patron page, sign up for a patron account, and then you can pledge an ongoing monthly donation. It can be anything as little as $1 a month. And a big thank you again to our 53 patrons so far. Whichever way you do it, whether you do it through PayPal or through Patreon, you'll get a mention in the videos. So we'll say thank you very much to you publicly in videos, as long as you want. But a few people have chosen to stay anonymous if that's what you prefer to do. And just leave a little note with your donation, just letting us know that you would rather not be mentioned. And that's absolutely fine. There's no problem about that whatsoever. We'll just say thank you to this anonymous donor. So again, big thank you to all of the donors, big thank you to all of the patrons, special thank you to Mish Lucas for our latest donation. Right, as I said, I thought we'd start off with what's happening in the stratosphere for today's videos. So I haven't looked at this for a little while. This is the current situation in terms of the temperature at 10 HPA, which is one of the top levels of the atmosphere in the stratosphere. The black line shows that we had a sudden stratospheric warming shooting up there from that level, but it was in the middle of December to that level at the end of December, which was something like a, let's see, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 degree temperature rise in a few days. Now, we can't sustain that level of temperature very long in the stratosphere, so it rapidly started cooling down. That's where we are right now. So we have cooled things down, but we're around minus 40, and at this point in the year, we should be somewhere around minus 60, so we're still around 20 degrees or more above average, above the temperature that you would expect us to be at this point in January. So it's warmer than average in the stratosphere, but it isn't as warm, of course, as it was when we had the sudden stratospheric warming. Now, if we go a little bit lower down to 30 HPA, you can see that again, things are gradually cooling down there as well. So we did move that warmth from 10 HPA down to 30 HPA, down to that slightly lower level of the stratosphere. Got it around minus sort of 35, something like that at its peak at 30 HPA. That's where we currently are, somewhere around minus 45 or a little bit under minus 45. Still way above average. Again, this is around where we should be at this point in January. So at this point in the year, we should be actually under -70. So it's still significantly warmer than you'd expect it to be at both 10 and 30 HPA. It's how the GFS is forecasting temperatures to develop at 10 HPA over the next couple of weeks. This is from metroseal.fr. So we've got these green colours. That's the warm temperature we still have at 10 HPA. Not as warm as it was when we had the sudden stratospheric warming. And on these charts, that was depicted by kind of yellows, oranges and reds. So not at that level, but still significantly above average. Let's see what GFS is forecasted to happen over the next few days. So cooling is occurring. We're seeing the blue colours beginning to return. The polar vortex is beginning to start showing signs of reinvigorating itself, starting to get itself back together again here at 10 HPA at its roots. And things going colder as we go into more extended range as well. So it's taking us to the end of January as far as we can go, to the 28th of January. By which time you have quite a cold temperature actually at 10 HPA. Now don't worry about that if you're looking for colder conditions, because although at its roots in the stratosphere, the polar vortex will be starting to reinvigorate and will be starting to cool the temperature down at 10 HPA. And that's what we're actually looking for now. We're looking for a cool down in the stratosphere to push that bubble of warmth down into the troposphere. So it's no good really if we just keep this bubble of warmth within the stratosphere, because there's not actually any weather taking place there. We need to push this warm bubble of temperature down into the troposphere. So the fact that we're seeing signs here of quite significant cooling of the stratosphere over the next couple of weeks, and particularly in week 2, less so in week 1, but particularly week 2, this is quite a significant cool down. That's actually quite a good sign, I think, to propagate that bubble of warmth down, push it down into the troposphere, and that's where we need to set up a blocking area of high pressure, of course. So that could actually be quite good news if you're waiting for some genuine northern blocking and colder conditions within the troposphere. This is how the winds and fluxes are looking from the University of Berlin with the ECMWF website. So at 1 HPA, you can see that the zone winds are now really strengthening again, right at the very, very top of the stratosphere, right at the very top level of the stratosphere at 1 HPA. After that reversal that occurred at 1 HPA while the sudden stratospheric warming was happening, we see that we have reinvigorated big time the zone winds at 1 HPA. The zone winds looking very weakened though still at 10 and 30 HPA. So the blue line here is the temperature that has just gone through this season for 10 HPA. The red line is 30 HPA. We've had a reversal of the zonal winds that's gone on for quite a few days now at 10 HPA. I should say. And we see a very gradual tick up of the zonal wind at 10 HPA over the next 10 days, taking us to around there. Just a very, very slow and gradual tick up, still way weaker than it was before the sudden stratospheric warming happened. The red line is most interesting though, that's 30 HPA, and you can see that actually that is being forecast to go into reverse here at around days 7, 8 and 9. So the one thing we haven't had, we have had everything else from this sudden stratospheric warming. We have a big warming in the temperature at 10 HPA, it propagated down to 30 HPA, it reversed the zonal winds and it split the polar vortex. It reversed zonal winds at 10 HPA. One thing we haven't had is reversal of the zonal winds at 30 HPA, but the ECMWF is actually showing that by day 10, it is actually showing today a reversal of the zonal winds at 30 HPA, and that's closer to the troposphere, of course. So that tells us that even in 10 days' time, we will still be waiting for the effects of this sudden stratospheric warming to continue to feed through the system. Sometimes these sudden stratospheric warmings, their impacts can occur very, very quickly. And I'm thinking with that, particularly last winter, when we had the beast from the east, we had a sudden stratospheric warming, I think it was around the 10th or the 12th of February, sometime in that time frame. And within around a week, we was already seeing very strong signs of a Scandinavian high. Of course, we had the beast from the east in the last week of February. And another very quick response to a sudden stratospheric warming was back in 2013, when we had that big warming of the stratosphere, that big sudden stratospheric warming through the first week of January 2013. And within around 2 or 3 days, we were starting to see signs of weakening of the Atlantic. And within a week, we was pretty cold and we was having snow. So sometimes you get a very rapid response, or you seem to get a very rapid response to these sudden stratospheric warmings. Other times they can be a real slow burner, and it takes a long time, it seems to take a long time to get all that much of a response. And this is more of a slow burner one, I think, that we've got going on this winter. Of course, other times you get no response at all to the sudden stratospheric warming, and that is particularly what happened in the winter of 2001, 2002, but there have been other examples to that as well. Another really slow burner one was, I think, 2005, 2006. There was a sudden stratospheric warming in January 2006. It seemed to take a long time before we got all that much blocking, but at the end of February into March, it did actually get very blocked in 2006. So sometimes you get a very rapid response, sometimes you get a slow response, but you do eventually get there, and other times you get no response at all. This looks like it's going to be one of those slow burner, slow response. I think we are going to get a tropospheric response to this, but it's taking its time. It's not like what happened last winter, which was very, very quick. And even in 10 days time, as I say, signs of the reversal of the solar winds at 30 HPA telling us that even as we get into kind of like the final week of January, we're still getting responses to that sudden stratospheric warming, which, remember, happened before the new year. Right, so let's see what's going on with the weather then. And these are the 500 millibar height anomaly flowcharts from Penn State University. We've got the ECMWF on the top, and the GFS is on the bottom. 500 millibars, 80,000 feet, is an area in the atmosphere. High pressure and low pressure are being moved around by the jet stream running above. Red extrapolates high pressure blue to low pressure. And these are the mean flow charts for 7 to 10 days time. So they're going to take us to around the 22nd of January. So the ECM shows we've got this trough of below average heights across many central, northern and down to southwestern parts of Europe. A big area of low pressure there covering most of the continent. We've got this ridge out to the northwest of the British Isles extending out into the Atlantic, but then we've got low pressure up around Greenland. That's sort of a remaining influence of the polar vortex. So the flow of the jet stream is doing something like that. We're very close there to pulling in some really cold air from the north and from the northeast, but we do need to take that ridge just that little bit further northwest. So instead of the ridge being kind of like between Scotland and Iceland, we want it for cold conditions. We want it somewhere around Greenland to Iceland, in that kind of position. If we get that high pressure around Greenland, then we will force this trough back westwards, and the trough with the jet stream will be doing something a little bit like that. So that's what I'm looking for. Not quite in the right position with that ridge between days 8 to 10. For significantly colder conditions, but it will be pretty cold if that comes off. I mean, don't get me wrong, we are looking at cold weather starting in the second half of this week, and I think the scenario is that as we go through the final week to 10 days of January, things just start to get colder and colder. And then as we go down to the GFS, this is how the GFS is looking. So this one, the ridge is kind of like through the central part of the Atlantic in a rather different position to what the ECM is showing. The trough is back further west as well. The trough is through Scandinavia and much of Central and Western Europe. So again, very, very close to pulling down really cold conditions. Again, to be perfect, we just want to take this ridge further northwards and centre it over Greenland and up towards the Arctic. Again, you'll notice there's no real blocking here over the North Pole up to day 10, which is what we're looking for. Ultimately, what we're looking for from this sudden stratospheric warming is northern blocking to set up. And on the GFS, the ridge is kind of like south of Greenland, North Atlantic, that kind of area, not quite getting in towards Greenland and the Arctic. But of course, this is a transitional period, and it may not be until we get to the final week of January, or possibly even into February, that we start to see that true northern blocking coming along. As it is, though, that is quite a cold setup, because the trough is in over Scandinavia and it's covering Central Western Europe, and although we are trying to maintain an Atlantic flow, we're not really achieving it, and the jet stream is going down there, so on the cold side of the jet, so that could be bringing in wintry conditions definitely by day 10. These are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles. We're looking at High Wycombe today, down in the south of the country. Someone's asked me to have a look at High Wycombe. So the red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average for High Wycombe, and we're starting off mild for this weekend and into the start of the coming week. Then temperatures through next week are sliding away, becoming colder through the week, and as we go into the second half of January, that's the 15th of January just there, as we go through the second half of January into the closing days of the month, still looking pretty cold really. The trend is still below average, below the 30-year temperature average. Still not seeing signs of going into the freezer. So again, to go into the freezer, we're going to have to go between -10, -15 at 850 HPA, that kind of level, which will take some of these coloured lines of spaghetti down here. That's if we're to go into the freezer and have ice days, severe frost, and sort of blizzard type conditions, drifting snow. So we're not going to that level, but it looks like we're going to between -5 and -10 at 850 HPA. Quite a few of these ensemble members do get down to -10, which is pretty cold. That's going to be cold enough for snow, definitely in January. And of course, it's more unsettled too, so there's plenty of dry weather coming up until the middle of the month, but then the precipitation spikes are returning. So again, it's this idea that in the second half of January, we're going colder and we're going more unsettled. We're not going into a big freeze yet. Ultimately, this could all end up in a big freeze. I'm certainly not ruling out a big freeze by the end of January or into February. We might get sufficient northern blocking to produce really freezing cold type conditions, beast from the east type conditions, if you like. We're not at that level yet. We are just transitioning from what has been a mild, very mild first half to the winter to a colder and more unsettled pattern as we're going into the second half of January. And by that, I'm talking about maximum temperatures cold enough for snow. So as it turns more unsettled, because the air is becoming colder, there could be the potential for snow out of this in the next week to 10 days. And also cold enough for frost, ice at night. But let's not get too carried away and think we're talking about a big freeze. There's no evidence of that within the short range model output at this stage. Ultimately, that is where we could get to, but not yet. Temperature anomalies from the 12th to the 20th of January are a little bit above average still, so remains relatively mild for this week and into the early part of next week. I'm still expecting these to trend colder over the next few days. Precipitation anomalies a little bit drier than average. I'd expect those to trend more unsettled over the next few days. This is how the GFS is looking for Tuesday. Still relatively mild, with the wind coming from a west or southwest direction. Wednesday is the change. A cold front moves down across the country and pulls down cold air from the north, and then we get this ridge building behind it for Thursday. Friday and into weekend, very complicated. We're within cold air, but we've got this area of low pressure moving in from off the Atlantic into this wedge of cold air that's kind of like sitting across all of this area. So how quickly that low pressure moves in and how successful it is in dislodging the cold air is going to be important as to whether we have rain coming in from off the Atlantic or whether it actually turns to sleet or snow. This is Saturday, 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, and this is suggesting a stall of that area of low pressure. So the main low is out here, but there is a weather front that's going to be in this kind of position, and it is really struggling against these cold, the cold air, the block of cold air, the wedge of cold air that's sitting over top of the country, and the mild air that's trying to come in from from off the Atlantic. So that does suggest we're not far away, probably, from sleet or snow, particularly for northern eastern parts of the country, Friday into Saturday. Eventually that does push through, and then we start to bring quite cold air down from the northwest, actually, with wintry showers. We're running up towards day 10, and it's turning increasingly unsettled and cold. So we've got this deep area of low pressure around Iceland on the 21st of January. As we get through to day 10, that area of low pressure is sinking southeastwards across the UK. Again, that's pulling quite cold air down with it, so that's bringing rain or potentially quite heavy snow across parts of the country around the 21st or 22nd. It's rather marginal, but there is definitely a risk of snow there as well, a snow event with that. That moves out to our east, and then start pulling down some really very cold air from the north, going into a north to northeasterly wind. Then we start to build a ridge, in the extended range now, we start to build a ridge through the country, so that looks pretty cold, still very cold but dry, and that ridge starts to move up towards Scandinavia at the end of its GFS run as low pressure begins to try to push in from off the Atlantic. That could again be another snow event there on the 26th of January. And that's how we finish up on the 6 o'clock run of the GFS operational, with high pressure seemingly building over Scandinavia. Low pressure is being blocked out here. The winds are almost going into the east, so that looks poised potentially to turn even colder by the end of a GFS run. There's a big wedge of cold air sitting just to our east with those upper air temperatures not at all far from pulling that in from the east. So that's what I was talking about. The next couple of weeks, there's no sign of a big freeze, but that may be ultimately where we get to with this by the start of February. Certainly wouldn't rule it out. This is the parallel GFS run, again relatively mild on Tuesday, then turning colder from the northwest through the middle of the week as the wind turns into the north. Then low pressure tries to come in from off the Atlantic, nowhere near as successful though, being this low pressure in from off the Atlantic. So by next weekend we're still cold under this area of high pressure. These lows are really struggling to get in from off the Atlantic. We're going up towards day 10, excuse me, and by this point low pressure is heading in from off the Atlantic. That's coming into cold air, and has pretty cold air from Greenland following along behind, so that could be a bit of a snow event there at day 10. And then the same idea with this low, sinking southwards from Greenland and Iceland, moving down into the UK. Quite cold air again, rotating around that, so definitely a risk of some wintry conditions. By the time we get through to the 24th of January, we're pushing that low pressure over towards Denmark and pulling down a cold north to northeasterly wind, remaining pretty cold and wintry till the very end of the parallel GFS run, where we start to introduce a bit of a westerly flow back in from off the Atlantic. But it's not a big freeze, but it is certainly cold enough at times to produce some snow. ECMWF, relatively mild on Tuesday, turning colder through the middle of the week as wind turns into the north. Then we're trying to move these areas of low pressure in from off the Atlantic, but they're really struggling compared to that GFS run. Anyway, we're maintaining cold conditions through next weekend, and mainly dry, maybe with a few snow flurries in places too. We finish up with the ECM at day 10, Tuesday 22nd of January, under a ridge of high pressure with low pressure out to the northwest around Greenland and Iceland. That's still cold, dry and frosty up to day 10 with the ECMWF. The ECM postage stamps are looking like this in terms of the ECM Ensemble. So to day 10, which is the 22nd of January, you've got 18 Ensemble members looking like this. They've got low pressure over and to the east of the country. They've got a ridge of high pressure out in the middle of the Atlantic. They're unsettled and they're quite cold too, pulling the winds in from a north or northwesterly direction. Then we've got another 17 with the ridge in the Atlantic there, from the middle of the Atlantic. And low pressure is kind of like to the southeast of us with those 17. So those are a bit colder, I would have thought. They're pulling in winds more from a north or even northeasterly direction. And then we've got 16, so a real split within the ECM ensembles at day 10, including the operational run, which we're just looking at, and the control, which look like this. They have a weak area of low pressure out to the northwest, and then the ridges through the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And so with these, we've got more of an Atlantic flow, although we know the operational run is actually quite dry, frosty and cold. at day 10. And then as we go through to 2 weeks away, these are all the options that are on the table. Loads of them at 360 hours, which is the 27th of January. So we've got 15 ensemble members with genuine northern blocking, high pressure going up towards Greenland, and low pressure is kind of like to the south of the UK. Those would be very cold, bringing winds in from a northerly direction. Another 11 with a mid-Atlantic ridge just here and low pressure through the UK. So those have a little bit more of an Atlantic influence. They're not as cold. There's another 10 that have a ridging out in the middle of the Atlantic with low pressure to the south of us. So again, a little bit more of an Atlantic flow with those ones, not genuine northern blocking with those. Then we've got 9 that have high pressure through the mid-Atlantic and going up towards Greenland with low pressure again to the south of the country. They're colder, they'll be bringing winds in from more of a north or northeast direction. And then these ones, 6, it's a minority option, but these ones have real northern blocking from the North Atlantic going up to Greenland and also extending it back into Scandinavia. They're very cold with low pressure to the south of the UK and maybe bringing in direct easterly winds with those ones. Those will be the coldest members of the ECM ensembles. Putting it all together, I think it does look as though the ECM is trending increasingly blocked and cold for that final week of January. Finally, I thought I'd just show you the Bayesian Climate Centre because we haven't looked at that for a little while. So these are the 500 millibar heights and they're broken down into 10-day periods. The first 10-day period will take us from the 11th to the 20th of January. The coming 10 days has a ridge in the middle of the Atlantic with the trough to the north and east of the UK over here. So we're close to pulling down very cold air from the north, but we're just close enough to that ridge overall to keep more of an Atlantic influence. Then we go to the next 10-day period, which is the 21st to the 30th of January, and the ridge just goes up a little bit more towards the northwest, with the trough then extending through much of Central and Western Europe. So these ones, we're starting to pull in colder winds from a northeasterly direction. So that will be a colder period there through the final 10 days of January, potentially quite wintry, and particularly for more southern and eastern parts of the country, I would have thought. The next 10-day period is the 31st of January to the 9th of February, with the below average heights over the UK, above average heights appearing around Greenland. So these ones look like they could be quite cold as we're going into the early part of February as well, where you would be expecting to bring cold air in from the north. And then the final 10-day period, which is the 10th to the 19th of February, has really extensive northern blocking with high pressure from Greenland going to the north of Scandinavia. Low pressure is underneath it. The jet stream is down here as well, and these will be pulling in very cold winds from an easterly direction, I would have thought. So once we get the next 10 days out of the way, it does look as though the Bayesian Climate Centre is pretty cold, really. The temperature anomaly for the next 10 days, the 11th 20th of January, is slightly milder than average, slightly above average, but then as we go through to the next 10-day period, it goes colder than average, a cold and average 10 days coming up by around a degree or so below average, really cold into the freezer cold for Scandinavia and northeastern parts of Europe. The next 10-day period, which is the first 10 days of February, it's the 31st of January to the 19th of February, not quite as cold in that one, but still a little bit below average, very cold across Scandinavia. And then the final 10-day period, which takes us from the 10th to the 19th of February, this one goes colder, go much below average. By that point, we're talking about 2 to 4 degrees below average, potentially on the scale, most of Europe into the freezer as well, telling us that the Bayesian Climate Centre, once we get the next 10 days out of the way, the Bayesian Climate Centre is looking really very cold up to the end of January and going into the start of February as well, in line with the JMA, as we saw yesterday with JMA Friday, and in line with the CFS chart. I thought we'd leave the CFS off today because we've looked at that every day through the week, and every day it has been showing significantly cold and block conditions for late January and into February. I can tell you he's still doing that today, well, including today's video, but I can tell you the CFS is still in line with that idea. So shorter range, it's turning more unsettled, it's turning colder. There's increasingly the chance of wintry conditions as we're going through the next week to 10 days, next couple of weeks. And there is still the chance that this could ultimately end up in quite a freeze-type pattern if we get the required northern blocking. There's no evidence in the short range of that at the moment. There is a little bit of evidence of that in the longer range output, but that's unreliable. So let's not think too much about big freezes and sort of severe conditions yet for the UK. We can think about that for northern and eastern parts of Europe and Central Europe, but we can't think of that yet for the UK. What we've got to focus on is increasingly unsettled, but also increasingly cold and also increasing chances of wintry conditions, albeit probably to start off with anyway, quite transient and marginal. But as we're going along, getting further and further towards the end of January, so those snow events might start getting more widespread and more potent too. I don't think it'll be too long before we're starting to dust down snow watch. Right, that's it for today's videos. Tomorrow we're going to have a Gauss Weather Sunday roundup, and I suspect we'll do an Ensembles watch tomorrow evening as well. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.